Salut tout le monde! Welcome back to Unintentionally Frenchified. Today I'm going to be talking to you about the 7 most common mistakes I see French people, or I hear French people saying when they speak English, and even when they're fluent, because let's face it, even when you speak a language fluently, doesn't mean that there aren't some pesky or tricky things that are really hard to remember. Or you can by chance just have somebody that never corrects you and you have no idea that you're saying things wrong. I, for example, spent 2.5 years calling a bus stop a fishbone because un arrêt de bus and un arrête de bus aren't the same words. Not cool, guys. Nobody corrected me. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the 7 most common mistakes that French people make when they're speaking English, and hopefully this will help you avoid them, or just remind you again not to make them. Before we jump into the 7 things, really important to give a quick shout out because I have an amazing voucher from Lingoda Language School for all of my viewers out there who are thinking about starting a new language, who are on the journey to starting a new language, who are advanced but still wanting to learn more. I actually have a voucher code that I put in the video description for 20% off of classes the first month. And also there's a 7-day free trial period where you can try up to 3 classes. So you can really check it out and see if you like it and if it's right for you. And all of that information is in the description below. Lingoda is just about great for everyone. If you're a shy beginner, you have on average 3 people per class plus your native speaking teacher. If you hate getting out of your PJs, you can take classes from home. You prefer going to bed at 2 a.m. or being productive on your lunch break? Then take the classes at noon or the classes at 2 a.m. Classes are 24/7 when you want them. Or if you're like me and you've decided to try something completely new, a new language, I'm learning Spanish, guys! And if you like to study with actual material and you're pretty anal about it like me, then as you can see, because this is me taking my very first Spanish class that you can see, you actually have downloadable material at every single class. So you can have access to it before the class to study, you have access to it after the class to keep learning, and then of course you get to follow along with the material during the class. And honestly, everything from signing up, taking my first class, getting my class review, knowing what I needed to study afterwards was super smooth from the beginning to the end. You don't just have to take my word for it though. Go check out Lingoda's Instagram account because they have a lot of testimonials from other people who have taken classes like me. And you can of course check out more information with the links below in the video description, which gives you your voucher code for your 20% off lessons the very first month, as well as your access to that free 7-day trial. All right, now let's jump into those 7 most common mistakes I see French people making. I'm gonna start off with probably the sweetest one and one of the most common ones, which is I miss you in English. So when you say I miss you in French, you say tu me manques, which like literally translates into you are lacking to me, which I feel like is really sweet because it kind of gives this impression that the person that you miss is like a part of you and you know, they're gone, and so there's a part of you gone. But what's not so sweet about it is that in French, that means that you actually start the phrase with you. So like, you miss me is what they accidentally say in English when they want to say I miss you. And it's funny because in some instances that definitely can work, but in other ones you're like, wait, what? Like, is that really what you wanted to say? And so if you're trying to have like a romantic, sweet moment and then it comes off as like really cocky or not what you're going for, it can be a little frustrating and also be a little confusing if the person you're speaking to doesn't speak French. So this is one where I would just recommend memorizing because there's no other way to get around it. The word teaching often becomes to the French, you are learning me something as well. And this, of course, has an explanation too. The fact that the word to learn or to teach in French is the same word. It's apprendre. So for example, if you say, I learned to write, you can say, j'ai appris à écrire. And if you want to say, I taught him how to write, you can say, je lui ai appris à écrire. So you use appris, so apprendre, in both of these instances, which means that when a French person is saying to somebody, thank you for teaching me something, often it comes off as thank you for learning me, because you can kind of like mess it up in your mind. And I think it's actually one that people really won't understand what you're saying. It's really gonna make people go, You know, it's not an easy one to kind of smooth over like some of the other ones that I'm gonna say, so Another one that you've really just got to memorize. So this one is one of those that if you say it, people still understand what you're trying to say, so it's not that big of a deal. And I'm kind of wondering if this is very specific to the region where I grew up in the USA, or maybe just the USA in general, and it's something that people use more, I don't know, in England or in Australia or in India, but we don't say proposed in the same way that you say this in French when you want to suggest something. So in French, when you want to suggest an idea or a restaurant or suggest a project at work, you use the verb proposer, which does directly translate to proposed, but I wouldn't say the verb proposed is something that I ever heard in this context when I was in the US. So for example, I would hear the word proposed as like a proposal, like an engagement proposal. And in French, the word suggest, suggérer, it does exist, it definitely does, but I've actually never heard anybody use that when they want to suggest an idea. I've always heard them use the word proposer. So I'm not even sure that we would say that these are false friends, because maybe they do use proposer, like I proposed in England, for example, but in the US, you really only use the word suggested. So if you said like, I would propose to go to this restaurant tonight, people will absolutely understand, and it does come off as sounding very formal. Grammatically, it might be correct, but I would really strongly suggest using the word suggest. The it versus the she and he is something I can't let slide because it really, really comes off, unfortunately, as quite bizarre when you hear it for the first time. So in French, when you're talking about non-living objects, they all have a gender. So like the chair has a gender, the car has a gender, the house has a gender. Almost everything has a gender, which means that when you're talking, for example, in French and you say, I just bought a new car, and we would say in English, it's green. Well, in French, they would say, I just bought a new car, she is green. And of course, in French, when I speak French, often I forget about that, and I'll still use the word for it, which works sometimes and doesn't in other instances. But anyways, in English, it really never works to use the word he or she when the object is non-living. And you hear it a lot. My husband even will say this. He'll, say like, oh, the chair over there, she is. And I'm like, no, it is. Like, if the thing is not living, or if you don't know the gender, you have to use it. We love the word it in English. Use it as often as you can. It's okay. The only exception, and I did just talk about cars, is some people do feel quite attached to like their boat or their car or maybe like their house or like something, and they'll like give it a gender, but it's kind of like as a joke and a name, and they'll be like, oh, well, that's my car, Bertha, and she's old, she's been around for 30 years, Bertha takes me everywhere, but like, it's a joke. You can't actually really refer to your car as a she, grammatically speaking. So it's the only time that passes. Otherwise, you've really got to embrace the word it. This one is great. This one's hilarious. So I'm very interested in everybody's input about this one. So thanks in advance. This one comes from my office most particularly. So most people in my office finish their emails with merci d'avance, which directly translates to thank you in advance. And usually what they're doing in this email is they're kind of asking for help on something or saying that they need something, and then kind of thanking you in advance at the end for your help. And what happens is that they will say this exact same thing when they're speaking English at the end of an email. So they ask their question, they say that they would like help on something, and then they would say, thank you in advance for your help, or thank you in advance for doing this. And I'm always like, ooh, and I cringe because it's so aggressive in English. And I don't know if you guys think it's aggressive in French, but a lot of people do it. But it's kind of like, I'm asking for your help in an email, and then when you finish it saying thank you in advance, you're not really giving me the option to help or not. And usually there's like questions and in the email and whether or not I can do this, and then you kind of finish it off with thanks in advance, which is kind of feels like in English like do it. So you go from having like this maybe not very aggressive email to making it quite aggressive at the end. And of course, sometimes you're trying to be aggressive. I get the passive aggressive emails, but when you don't want to send a passive aggressive message and you put that at the end of the email, it really becomes pretty aggressive. And we had a huge discussion of work about this between all of my French colleagues, and they were like, I had no idea. So I figured this is a good one to share because it depends on the message you want to spread. But if you're not trying to send an aggressive message, I would really take the thank you in advance out of your vocabulary. Replacing the word right at the end of a sentence by no. So this is one where people are still going to understand, but it's a little bit off because in French, there's lots of different ways that you can make a statement into a question. You can use est-ce que, you can change around the words a bit, the subjects and the verb, and you can also add non or n'est-ce pas at the end of a statement. And so obviously when the French are then going to speak English, they like to add at the end of a sentence no, like you like pizza, no? Or you like this song, no? And it makes sense, but at the end of a sentence, if you've made a statement and then you kind of want to like raise your voice and ask a question, often we would use right. So you like pizza, right? We wouldn't make it negative the same way that you do in French. So as I said, people will 100% understand. It's a bit like the proposed versus suggested. People get what you're saying, but there's just one thing that is a bit off. And the reason I'm even bringing this up is not only do I hear it from other French, native French speakers speaking English, is I've actually started doing it in English because I hear it so often. And even though it's close, it's really not exactly the way to say it. All right, guys, let me know in the comments below what you thought. If there was anything I missed that you would have absolutely added in this video, please let us all know. Of course, don't forget to check out the Lingoda voucher code that I told you about in the beginning of the video. You get 20% off your first month of classes plus a 7-day trial with up to 3 classes free. So there's really nothing to lose on that one if you're really looking to boost your fluency fast. All right, guys, looking forward to seeing everyone next week. Bisous!